It was just past midnight when the emergency department of St. Mary's Trauma Center slipped into that peculiar stillness only the dead of night can bring. A quiet charged with tension, the kind that makes every distant beeping and hurried footstep echo like thunder. The fluorescent lights overhead flickered intermittently, casting long, wavering shadows across the polished linoleum floor. Emily Carter, a trauma nurse with years of experience, had walked these hallways countless times, yet that night felt different. There was an unspoken weight in the air, a sense that something unseen was hovering just beyond the edges of perception. Monitors beeped rhythmically, IV drips whispered in the silence, and the faint scent of antiseptic clung to everything. It was a familiar symphony of life and urgency. Yet, as Emily reached for the intercom, a voice sliced through the usual hospital noise. A calm, measured voice, giving instructions as though it belonged to someone at the control station. Only, it didn't. She froze, hand hovering over the intercom button. Every nurse in the room paused mid-step, glancing at one another with the shared unease that needed no words. The voice was not one of the staff logged in. It was clinical, precise, yet unnervingly human, guiding them to a patient in a way no protocol could dictate. Check his vitals, administer fluids, prepare for intubation. Each instruction came with a clarity that cut through the chaos, yet no one could account for where it had come from. Emily's chest tightened, her training screamed to follow orders, yet a part of her trembled at the impossibility of the situation. Was this an elaborate prank? A miscommunication? Or something far stranger? The camera would follow Emily's gaze as she scanned the empty station, every detail magnified. The hum of machines, the faint scratching of wheels on the floor, the flickering light above. Time seemed to stretch unnaturally. A subtle echo of the voice lingered even after the last words faded, leaving behind a silence so deep it pressed against the ribs like a physical weight. Security footage later would show nothing unusual, no unauthorized staff, no hidden speakers, no technical glitch that could explain it. Yet the experience had left an indelible mark on Emily, a mixture of awe, disbelief, and an unshakable sense that the ordinary rules of the hospital had bent, if only for a fleeting moment. As Emily recounts it now, years later, her voice is calm, but the memory carries the same tremor of wonder and fear. The ward had been alive with human determination one moment, and in the next the ghostly hand seemed to reach through the intercom, guiding, instructing, intervening. Nurses whispered about it in hushed tones. Doctors shrugged it off with polite skepticism. Yet the memory lingered like an unclosed door, impossible to ignore. And then, everything changed. A patient's life was at stake, and every second mattered. The voice, inexplicable as it was, directed them with a precision that seemed almost beyond human capability. Emily followed the instructions, heart racing, mind torn between rational caution and instinctive obedience. The tension was unbearable, cinematic in its intensity, as if the hospital itself had become a stage for the impossible. A place where life, death, and mystery collided in the faint green glow of monitors and the steady pulse of alarms. By the end of that night, Emily knew she had witnessed something that defied understanding. Not an echo, not a hallucination, but a phenomenon that would haunt her memory and her career forever. The audience is left suspended in that moment of disbelief and awe, compelled to follow Emily deeper into the story, to explore how a voice that should not have been there could intervene in the fragile balance between life and death. John Matthews arrived in the trauma bay just as the night seemed to deepen its grip on the hospital. He was a man in his 40s, his body crumpled from a high-speed car accident, blood staining his clothes and skin pale beneath the harsh fluorescent lights. Emily remembers the rush of adrenaline, the controlled chaos that immediately enveloped them. Monitors were attached, IV lines threaded, and the rhythm of urgent voices filled the room. John's injuries were severe, a traumatic brain injury that made his responses slow and erratic, internal bleeding that threatens to take him at any moment, and multiple fractures that left him immobile and in excruciating pain. Emily narrates these details with a clarity that allows the audience to grasp the gravity of the situation, without becoming lost in medical jargon, explaining, for instance, how a brain contusion could cloud consciousness, or how internal hemorrhaging silently steals life if not treated with precision and speed. Yet, amidst this harsh medical reality, there's a subtle foreshadowing of the extraordinary. Emily recalls the fleeting sensation she had as she worked on John, an intuition that something unusual was stirring around him, though she could not yet place it. It was the kind of premonition that makes a seasoned nurse pause mid-step, the hair on her arms rising as if the hospital itself were holding its breath. As John's vitals teetered between stability and decline, Emily moved with both urgency and care, aware that every choice might mean the difference between life and death. The audience begins to feel the tension not just of a medical emergency, but of a narrative unfolding beyond ordinary explanation. There is wonder threaded into every decision. The machine's relentless beeping, the faint smell of antiseptic mixing with the metallic tang of blood, the muffled sounds of distant conversations that seem to vanish just as quickly as they are heard. Through Emily's perspective, viewers experience the duality of trauma care, the cold, procedural steps required to save a life, and the intangible human elements that cannot be measured, intuition, empathy, and the haunting sense that sometimes the impossible might intervene. The stage is set. The audience knows John is at the center of something that will challenge both science and understanding, leaving them poised for the events yet to unfold.
Emily Carter had seen every type of chaos a trauma ward could throw at a nurse, yet nothing could have prepared her for the voice that came over the intercom that night. The monitors were flashing red warnings. John Matthews' vitals were unstable, his oxygen levels dropping in small, perilous increments. Emily reached for the crash cart, her hand steady despite the rapid pounding of her heart, when a voice cut through the hospital's usual hum, a calm, authoritative voice giving precise instructions about John's care. Administer 500 milliliters of fluids now. Prepare for intubation. Check his airway immediately. The problem was that no one was logged into the intercom system. Emily scanned the room, her gaze flicking from startled colleagues to the empty control station, but no one appeared responsible. The instructions were meticulous, almost surgical in their timing, and yet they came from an impossible source. Nurses paused, eyes wide, unsure whether to question it or obey. Emily hesitated for a fraction of a second, the weight of responsibility pressing on her. Every second counted. To doubt could cost John his life. To follow an unseen hand could be dangerous. And still, instinct compelled her to act. As she administered fluids exactly as the voice had instructed, Emily felt a strange sensation of being guided by something beyond ordinary understanding. Every movement aligned perfectly with the critical needs of the patient. Every intervention that saved precious seconds seemed uncanny. The camera would linger on her hands, precise and methodical, moving as if choreographed by the invisible instructions. Other nurses whispered nervously, some laughing nervously, some gripping the rails of the gurney as if holding on for both balance and sanity. The doctor overseeing the case glanced at Emily, skepticism written plainly on his face. Yet even he paused to consider whether the voice might somehow be correct. The voice continued, guiding, timing, directing interventions with an almost preternatural knowledge of John's condition. Emily recalls feeling a cold rush down her spine, a combination of fear, disbelief, and a strange awe. Was this some hidden staff member pulling an elaborate prank, some glitch in the intercom system, or something else entirely? Something that defied every logical explanation she had trained to rely on for years. Every command mirrored the most critical decisions a trauma nurse could make, as if the voice understood John's injuries intimately, better than anyone present. In the midst of this surreal guidance, Emily's mind raced. She had always trusted her instincts, had relied on years of medical training. But here, her instincts merged with something she could not explain. The voice knew the steps that would stabilize John, yet it came from nowhere. The fluorescent lights above seemed to flicker in rhythm with the voice, casting ghostly shadows along the hallway. Even the machines, the monitors and alarms, seemed to acknowledge the invisible hand at work, responding as if in perfect coordination with the instructions being given. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the voice was gone. Silence returned to the trauma bay, heavier than before. Every nurse, every doctor stood frozen for a heartbeat, as if daring to speak might shatter the fragile balance they had just survived. John's vitals began to stabilize, the crisis slowly retreating as the team worked, but the memory of that voice lingered like smoke in the air, impossible to ignore. Emily would later describe the moment as one of awe, fear, and a deep, unshakable sense that something had intervened beyond the realm of ordinary human capability. By the end of the night, the truth remained elusive.
No staff member could be held accountable, no technical glitch identified. Yet the life of a man had been preserved by instructions that should not have existed. The audience is drawn into this tension, questioning whether the voice was supernatural, a technical anomaly, or a manifestation of something yet to be understood, a thin thread linking consciousness, fate, and the fragile, miraculous act of saving a life. The morning after the incident, the hospital was a hive of quiet speculation. Emily Carter recounted the events to administrators, fellow nurses, and the attending physician, yet every attempt to trace the source of the voice yielded nothing. The intercom system had been meticulously checked. No authorized logins, no glitches in the circuitry, no recording devices hidden in corners. Security footage confirmed it. No one approached the intercom at all. For the staff, the events of that night were both extraordinary and unsettling. How could a human voice, calm and precise, issue life-saving instructions without ever being spoken by someone physically present? Experts were brought in to offer explanations grounded in science and logic. Dr. Thomas Weaver, a neurologist specializing in stress-related perceptual phenomena, suggested auditory hallucinations as a possibility. He explained extreme stress, fatigue, and emotional intensity can sometimes create very real perceptions. The documentary illustrates this with visuals of neural pathways firing, synapses glowing in stylized animation, representing the brain's extraordinary capacity to generate convincing auditory experiences under pressure. Emily's colleagues, all seasoned professionals, shook their heads in quiet doubt, but the eerie precision of the instructions seemed to exceed even the most vivid hallucinations. Hospital administrators investigated possible technical malfunctions. Intercom systems were audited, electrical circuits traced, and sound levels analyzed. Yet every test returned normal. No anomalies, no interference, no plausible mechanical explanation. Even the security team reviewing hours of footage frame by frame found nothing unusual. No hidden wires, no staff member tampering with the system. Each negative result only deepened the sense of mystery. How could a voice so precise in timing and content guide them through a critical emergency with perfect accuracy and then vanish without a trace? Further consultation with cognitive scientists and psychologists added layers to the puzzle. They proposed the possibility of collective intuition in high-stakes medical scenarios, where experienced professionals might unconsciously synchronize their actions with life-saving efficiency. But Emily reflected on the subtle details, the exact words, the timing, the specificity of the interventions, and what she thought she understood about medicine. Cinematic visuals capture her reflection against the dim glow of an empty corridor, monitors humming faintly in the background, each sound a reminder of the night's surreal events. She had witnessed something that challenged conventional understanding, something that no test or expert could fully explain. For viewers, this section presents a cerebral tension, the collision between rational, scientific explanation and the undeniable reality of Emily's experience. It raises questions about the limits of medical knowledge, the nature of consciousness, and the unexplained moments that can arise even in the most controlled clinical environments. The audience is left hovering between skepticism and wonder, compelled to consider whether some phenomena exist just beyond the edge of science, waiting to be acknowledged by those willing to see and to act when the impossible touches life and death. Days passed, and John Matthews began to stabilize, his vital signs gradually steadying under the tireless attention of Emily and the trauma team. The initial chaos of the emergency had faded, replaced by a quieter, more fragile rhythm, the rhythm of recovery. Yet, even as John improved, subtle anomalies began to ripple through the hospital ward. Small disruptions that seemed to echo the night of the intercom incident. Nurses reported brief cold drafts, sudden flickers in monitor screens, and fleeting whispers in the halls, moments so brief they could almost be dismissed, yet lingering long enough to unsettle even the most experienced staff. Emily noticed them too, each occurrence a ghostly punctuation in the otherwise methodical routines of patient care. In those early days of recovery, John's consciousness returned in fragments. His eyes would open, registering the room around him for only a few seconds before closing again. He would murmur words that made sense, then slip back into confusion, caught between clarity and the haze of trauma. Emily describes these moments with a mix of empathy and reverence, emphasizing the fragility of life and the extraordinary efforts required to sustain it. Every decision, when to administer fluids, when to adjust medication, when to intervene, felt amplified as though some unseen guidance continued to linger in the room, guiding hands and choices with quiet precision. The ward itself seemed to respond to these subtle, unexplainable currents. Shadows moved in ways that didn't align with the light. Shafts of sunlight shifted oddly across the walls, and fleeting shapes seemed to pass behind currents when no one was there. The cameras would linger on these moments, slow pans capturing the stillness and the faint distortions of reality, lending an ethereal quality to the clinical environment. It was as though the hospital, a place defined by order and science, had briefly opened itself to the unexplicable. Emily reflects on her role as both witness and participant in these events. The narration is introspective, weighted with a sense of awe that comes from standing on the threshold of life, death, and something beyond ordinary understanding. She recalls the nervous glances shared with colleagues, the silent acknowledgement that they were encountering something they could neither fully explain nor ignore. And yet, amid these mysterious occurrences, John's recovery continued, a testament to human resilience and perhaps to forces that remain unseen. For the audience, this section blends tension with quiet wonder. The audience is invited to feel the intimate, almost sacred nature of care in a trauma ward, the subtle interplay between human skill, chance, and mystery. The narrative does not provide answers, but instead heightens reflection, encouraging viewers to consider the thin line between coincidence and intervention, between science and the unknown. Gratitude, awe, and lingering fear intermingle, leaving the audience with the sense that life's most profound moments often occur in the spaces where understanding falters and mystery persists. The story continues to unfold, each heartbeat of recovery echoing the haunting question of what or who guided them through the night. In the weeks and months that followed, Emily Carter found herself haunted, not by the memory of a near-death patient, but by the voice that had guided them through the impossible. She described sleepless nights where hospital corridors stretched endlessly in her mind, shadows twisting just out of reach, the faint echo of that calm, precise voice whispering instructions she could no longer trace. Even when home, the memory lingered, a subtle, insistent weight pressing against the boundaries of her reason. She questioned herself constantly. Had she imagined it? Was it a trick of stress and adrenaline? Or had she, for a fleeting, inexplicable moment, witnessed something that defied logic entirely? Her colleagues felt it too. Emily recalls the quiet conversations in the break room, the way seasoned nurses would glance at each other with an unspoken acknowledgement of the night's impossibility. Doctors, while outwardly skeptical, admitted privately to moments of unease, their confidence shadowed by uncertainty. The hospital, a place built on procedure, expertise, and evidence, suddenly seemed permeable, susceptible to events that cannot be captured on charts or interpreted by tests. Emily's narration reflects on this tension between professional skepticism and personal experience, between the rational mind trained to measure and control and the inexplicable phenomena that defy measurement. Emily's emotional landscape was complex. She carried the weight of responsibility that comes with trauma care, compounded by a fear that she could not fully articulate. Cinematic imagery mirrors her introspection, empty hallways bathed in cold and flickering light, monitors humming faintly in the background, the slow, methodical turning of an IV drip casting shadows across the floor. These visuals emphasize her solitude, the quiet burden of knowing that life and death sometimes hinge on decisions that may be influenced by forces beyond. Quiet spaces creates a sense of lingering suspense. Viewers are encouraged to empathize with the psychological and spiritual dimensions of trauma care. The unseen weight carried by caregivers, the fragility of human life, and the subtle, haunting reality that even in the most controlled environments, mysteries can arise that challenge everything we believe we know. In this quiet tension, the story moves beyond a single night, beyond a single patient, into the profound and sometimes unsettling terrain of human experience. Even as John Matthews fully recovered, the shadow of that night remained, lingering in the minds of those who had witnessed it. The hospital returned to its usual rhythm. Monitors beeped. Footsteps echoed down the hallways. Patients were treated. Lives were saved. But for Emily Carter and for the staff who had been present, Nothing felt entirely ordinary again. The voice over the intercom was never heard again, and every investigation had drawn a blank. There was no logical explanation, no technical fault, no hidden staff member. Yet the memory persisted, like a ghost trapped in the fluorescent glow of the trauma bay, hovering at the edges of consciousness. Emily reflects on the experience with a mixture of humility and awe, acknowledging that some moments in medicine and in life itself elude explanation. She describes the lasting sense that something beyond human understanding had intervened, an intelligence, a presence, or perhaps a manifestation of intuition amplified in extraordinary circumstances. Her colleagues, though initially skeptical, quietly admitted that the precision of the voice's instructions and the timing with which John's life was preserved felt almost impossible to attribute to chance. The audience is drawn into this tension, invited to feel the eerie weight of the unknown, the subtle chill of mystery that settles in even in the most clinical of spaces. Cinematic visuals reinforce this haunting ambiguity. Empty intercom panels gleaming in quiet hallways, shafts of light slicing through dust motes, monitors ticking in rhythm with silent echoes of the past. Security footage replays unremarkable movement, emphasizing that the extraordinary is often invisible, detectable only in the way it changes what is real, what is possible. The juxtaposition of a fully recovered patient with the lingering sense of the unexplained creates a profound emotional resonance. Life continues, but the memory of intervention beyond understanding remains, a subtle but permanent alteration of perspective. Emily encourages viewers to consider not just the phenomenon itself, but the questions it raises about consciousness, mortality, and the nature of human experience. Could the voice have been an unexplained phenomenon, reaching across the thin veil between life and death? Was it a manifestation of collective intuition, a mysterious intelligence, or something entirely beyond our comprehension? The documentary does not attempt to answer these questions definitively. Instead, it honors the mystery, inviting the audience to sit with uncertainty and reflect on the profound fragility and resilience of life. In the final moments, the camera lingers on John Matthews, healthy and walking the halls of the hospital, juxtaposed with Emily standing alone, eyes distant, contemplating what she cannot explain. The narrative closes on this quiet, haunting note. Life persists. Medical science continues its relentless pursuit of understanding, but certain moments remain untouchable by reason, existing in the liminal space between the known and the unknowable. The story leaves the audience suspended between awe and unease, a lingering question embedded in the mind. When life hangs by a thread, what unseen forces might guide it, and how much of reality exists just beyond the reach of human understanding? This final section resonates with a subtle chill, a reminder that the intersection of medicine, consciousness, and mystery is not always resolved. The haunting memory remains, a testament to the profound complexities of life, death, and the unseen threads that sometimes intervene in ways we cannot fully explain.